Hello there. I'm here with Fortuny's Games today, and we are continuing our sessions about writing short stories. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my own short stories, an older one called The Călușari. It is a historical fantasy piece of fiction set in medieval Romania.
Yes, and it was a really wonderfully illustrated story as well, kind of in the same vein as what you're doing with the Tales of the North.
Exactly. It was my first illustrated piece of fiction because until that point I was only doing writing and then one or two illustrations of just the characters. This was the first time that I actually started to illustrate scenes, but I was doing them in graphite pencil, as we can see in the picture from your background.
Mm-hmm. So can you begin by telling us what are the Kalushari?
Yes, definitely. The Călușari are members of a male-only secret society who practiced a ritual acrobatic dance, and this happened in historical Romania. And now I'm going to explain a bit about the elements in this definition. First of all, by secret society, we understand a group with a strict hierarchy and purpose that one can only become a part of after performing an initiation rite. And all the rules, conventions, and symbolism must remain unknown to the outsiders, to those outside of the group. By ritual, I mean that the dance of the Călușari was believed to have magical powers, namely to cure madness or possession. So those who were believed to be the victims of fairies or evil spirits were supposed to be cured by their dances. And this ritual would take place between the Christian holidays of Easter and Pentecost. So the 50th day of Christ's resurrection, when the Holy Spirit descends. So during this time of the year, these dancers, would travel from village to village in order to perform this ritual. Also, it is a male only society. And one of the possible reasons why it is male only is that it also has a warring component. So the kind of dances that they do are very acrobatic. And in older times, this is definitely not the type of dancing that women would do. So, and the exclamations are often calls to war because they are supposed to be battling evil spirits, and also these evil spirits are mostly female in Romanian folklore. So the fairies are mostly female, so maybe this is one of the reasons why they are supposed to be males, except for the warring component.
I see. Can you tell us more about the costumes that, these performers wear when doing the dance and the ritual?
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah, they also have very specific costumes, and well, the symbolism behind it is that it is believed to be derived from an ancient pagan fertility cult dedicated to a horse deity. So everything in the dances and the way the ritual takes part, and in the costumes as well, is sort of reminding us of a horse. So I'm going to explain a bit more. The exact origins are unknown, but first of all, it the name Călușari comes from the word cal, which in Romanian means horse. It's related to the Latin word caballos, right? So Căluș, which is the name of the dance itself, is sort of a diminutive horse, I think, and scholars believe that maybe that was the name of the ancient deity. But this theory is disputed, so we don't really know if it used to be dedicated to a horse deity, or maybe it was related to similar rituals in the Roman Empire, because because we see dances similar to this also in Spain and Portugal, and even in Britain after the Roman conquest. So in England we have the Morris dance, which is very similar to this in costume as well. So so maybe this is the connection and the origin. So, like I was saying, the costumes, as you can see a bit in the image, involve fringes and bells that are attached to the feet, especially, probably because the sound of the bells would ward off evil spirits. So they also wear belts also across the chest and shirts with embroidered flowers because it is a ritual that is supposed to be taking place in spring. So um, that's the origin of the flower patterns on the shirts. And they also wear different props while dancing, such as sticks or wooden swords, and sometimes they even wear masks. As for the roles of the people involved, where we have the leader of the group, who is called Vataf, and he is the one who passes on the rules to the new members of the society, and the rules and the symbolism that they are not supposed to share with outsiders. And one of these rules is that they are supposed to remain chaste during the 2 weeks in which the ritual takes place and during which they travel from village to village. So, of course, they are not supposed to engage in anything sexual or sinful. Um, Also, another important, or maybe the most important member of the group is the mute, who is called as such because he isn't allowed to speak, while the others shout and say things. He isn't allowed to, but he's the one who does the most impressive acrobatic moves, because he jumps, he does handsprings and flips in the air, sometimes climbs on buildings. And an important element is the fact that he chews wormwood leaves or small sprigs. So of course wormwood would act like a mild hallucinogen. So we know that it is an ingredient in absinthe. So it is also associated with um, maybe hallucinations, but I think the hallucinations from absinthe that were renowned among artists and other creative people, they were mostly due to alcohol. So I'm not really sure if it's wormwood, but it's supposed to have a similar effect to cannabis.
Mm.
So this is one reason why he chose wormwood. And he also traditionally he has a wooden phallus under his skirt or tunic because it was supposed to be a spring fertility ritual. So well, this is what it probably was centuries ago, because sometime in the 19th century, the phallus symbol was banned. So now when we see Călușari dancing, we don't see anything that's even remotely erotic or related to fertility rights. It's worth mentioning here that even if it probably was an older pagan tradition, it was very well integrated into the Christian tradition. So, like I said, it happens after Easter. So the church really included in historical times these dances in their own rituals, and they were also promoted as having healing powers. But in recent times they stopped having this magical symbolism because the church and folklore tradition started to grow more and more apart. So now they're just, I mean, they were considered just superstition and they were banned in 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 more recent times, and now they're just dances. So just
Mm.
another Romanian traditional dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just looked up the Morris dance and it really does look like very similar, you know, the clothes and even the bells on the feet.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar. I was also very surprised when I first saw this connection, because I thought it was a Romanian thing, but then I realized that it's actually similar to a lot of things, and I didn't expect to see it in a country like England, because it's so different from Romania
Mm-hmm.
culturally.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is
yeah,
there
it's
any,
really
like
interesting.
is there any like Slavic countries like close to Romania that has this practice or something similar?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think this is why scholars came to the conclusion that it was something derived from Roman traditions,
Oh.
because it's not really Slavic countries, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, well, it overlapped the Roman tradition um, of Rosalia, it was called, and in Romanian, that Pentecost is still called Rusali. So it was basically this Christian holiday overlapped with the older Roman and Greek spring holiday for commemorating the dead. And wearing flowers or decorating the graves with garlands of flowers, and especially roses, and this is why it is called Rosalia. So and also it had a military component similar to the one that we see now with the Călușari, because soldiers were decorating their standards with roses to commemorate fallen soldiers. So it also coincided with the archaic festival of Lemuria, where spirits of the dead were commemorated. So it also had a similar apotropaic significance, so to ward off evil spirits, a
Mm-hmm.
protection kind of ritual. So this is what scholarship usually ties the tradition of the Călușari with. So a Roman um holiday, and then overlapped with a Christian one.
I
But
see.
it's definitely not Christian in what we see with the masks and the dances and everything. It's unlike anything in Christian tradition,
Mm-hmm.
other than the fact that they invoke God to help them defeat the evil spirits. There's nothing Christian about it.
Mm-hmm. So is the story set, it's not set in pre-Christian times. It is set in Christian times and overlaps with, you know, Christian beliefs. In your story, do we see this overlapping of Christian beliefs with this pagan ritual?
Oh yes, definitely. This is one of my favorite themes, and think that I have it a lot in my stories. The syncretism between pagan religions and Christian religion, and perhaps this is why I have a lot of stories that are set in these early periods of Christianity, where there are still older elements. Well, even in the stories set in Norse times, right? It is the period where Norway is christened. So it is somewhat similar to this, but I think that because Romania was converted to Christianity way earlier than Scandinavia, centuries earlier. It is interesting that these pagan traditions lasted so well into Christianity centuries after it was converted. So basically, this story of mine is set. I think I originally made it set in the 13th century, but I mean, it wasn't very specific. I mean, it is the Middle Ages, but from what I presented there, there is no real clue about what year or even what century it is set in. So, but it's medieval times, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And who are the characters?
Well, the main character is Codrin, who is a teenage boy who, in this group of dancers, plays the role of the mute. So he's the one who has the central role. And he is in love, we can say, with the boyar's daughter, Savina. So the boyar was the local leader of the village that he was living in. And the story takes place at Pentecost, where this group of dancers is called to hold their ritual, along with the rituals held by the priests, by the Orthodox priests. So Codrin and Savina, they've known each other for a very long time because the girl at one point got lost and fell in a ravine. And Codrin was the one who found her and who helped her and brought her back to her parents. And of course, her parents were desperate and everyone was looking for her, but he was the one to find her. So a connection formed between them, but the great difference in status between them prevents them from having any kind of relationship because Codrin is a peasant and she's a noble woman. So we can presume that she has a similar crush on him, but she doesn't really manifest it, and he doesn't really manifest it either. So, well, the, things are complicated when Savina is supposed to marry another nobleman, and the family, and he's visiting her family for the Easter holidays, and this is where the fantastic elements come in because it is presumed that the boyar is well, he has a sort of a negative influence upon her, and she begins to act as if she were possessed. In a way, she is obsessed with him, and she exhibits a strange behavior that is very unlike her. She is a very kind um, teenage girl and kind of shy, we can say, or maybe proper in manners, but she begins to act in a very uncharacteristic way where she comes to Codrin and she tries to make him jealous on the one hand and even to sort of seduce him or at least to play with his feelings because she knows that he has a crush on him. And well, Codrin doesn't really realize that there is something wrong with her, but as events progress, he starts to believe that she was somehow bewitched by the foreign nobleman that she was about to marry. So, well, this is the basic plot of the story. It is, I think, it is one of my more plot oriented stories, but at the same time, it is very surreal. So it's nothing like the Holmgang story that we discussed in one of the previous sessions.
Mm-hmm. It is definitely more, I think, mysterious in a sense too, because not only is it, more fantastical, I think there's also an element of mystery because you really wonder what happened to Savina and why is she acting in such a way.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And as usual, because I've never really written full-blown fantasy stories, this is perhaps one that is the most that would fall into the fantasy category, but it's not really explicit if there really is something supernatural, or maybe this is just the way he is, this is just the way she acts because she's somehow, I don't know, proud to marry the nobleman and in love, and so we don't really know what is going on. And with the things that Codrin feels, and the way he starts to believe that she is possessed, well, that can also be jealousy on the one hand and superstition on the other, because we also start to hear rumors that the foreign nobleman is uh, sort of an evil spirit, we can say. Maybe he's a vampire or something like that. And but that can only be, but that can be just peasant superstitions,
Mhm.
right? Because at one point Codrin does say that to Savina, and she laughs it off. She says, oh, are you listening to peasant superstitions? He's nothing like that, he's fantastic. So, so we don't really know. And we also have to keep in mind the fact that Codrin is under the influence of certain hallucinogens, right, at this point. So he's not really the most reliable narrator. The story is, I think the perspective would count as selective omniscience, but it still follows Codrin. So if he starts to see evil spirits around him, we have to remember that he is not only a superstitious person because he is a medieval man, but he is also, of course, he believes in evil spirits. He is Călușari, right? I mean, he really believes that there are evil spirits all around them, and he is supposed to keep them at bay. And to this, we add the wormwood part and the jealousy part. So it gets to a point as the action progresses and the story gets more and more fantastical, we don't really know what is real and what is not.
Mhm. I think we explore something similar in some of your Sons of Disobedience stories, right? In the future, we will see more of this blurring between reality and fantasy.
Yes, exactly, because this is one way in which I really love to tackle the theme of magic and of uh, religious professionals. I can call them like witches, for example, in medieval times, because I generally write realistic fiction and I aim to make my stories as realistic as I can. And at the same time, I need to portray all the mythology, the superstition, and the magic that was going on. It was actually a profession, right? Being a witch in medieval times. So I have to give a sense of magic and mysticism at at the same time. So this is how I try to do it. So it is basically the writing that makes the difference,
Mhm.
because it gets surreal, and the border between reality and fantasy sort of blurs. But at the same time, I always keep in mind that I need to have a realistic interpretation available as well. So I try to present it in such a way that both interpretations can be correct, and it's mostly up to the reader to understand it.
Mhm. So, how would you say that, your use of fantasy in this story compares to other, magic realism, if it can be considered that works?
Mm, oh yeah, this is a good question. Um, well, I really like this kind of historical fantasy, if we can call it this. So fantasy set in historical times that pays great attention to historical accuracy on the one hand, or recreating older times, but adds fantasy elements to it. So I can say that is my favorite kind of fantasy, obviously because I'm into historical fiction as well. So I love it when a piece of fiction also has a historical component. So in terms of fantasy, I also like when the fantasy is inspired from folklore, and so it involves on the one hand a good grasp of the culture that the story is representing, and of folk beliefs, and well, from then on, you can just twist them however you want. I mean, you can transform it into a full-blown fantasy where those things actually exist, the fairies, the vampires, and everything, or you can leave it up to interpretation. But I like the idea of finding inspiration in folklore. And of course, there are a lot of authors who did that. Most famously Tolkien, I think, because he is well, he recreates up to some point Norse and Celtic and Finnish mythologies,
Mm-hmm.
but also adds his own. But I think there are a, a great array of writings that could qualify as such, right? I mean, um, uh, I really loved, for example, in terms of historical fantasy and also some folklore, Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is one of my favorite books of that kind because it is set in early 19th century England, and it's basically the real world, just that magicians exist, but everything that is magical is based on British folklore, and the other world that exists is that of fairies, right? The other world with capital
Mm-hmm.
O. And it was really nicely done. And I really loved how they mix historical and folklore and yeah, well, realistic because everything else is realistic. It's basically a Harry Potter for adults, we can say. I mean, a Harry Potter that is not just teen fiction and funny and everything, a serious Harry Potter with actual historical elements. So
Mm-hmm.
I could compare it to. Oh, well, maybe it's not the best comparison because at the time when I wrote this story, I hadn't read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So I really did not have this in mind, but I'm just giving examples of writings that tackle fantasy in a rather similar way. And also, Neil Gaiman has such
Oh.
stories, right? The Anansi Boys, which is based on African folklore, and well, we can also compare it, like you said, with magical realism, right? Even like Kafka and mm, Borges, right? Umberto Eco, Coelho, even Bulgakov, right?
Mm-hmm.
Borges and Umberto Eco, I think they were generally great influences for me, especially during my I cannot really call them early, but um, in previous years, at the time when I was writing this, I think I was more inspired by Borges and Eco because I used to have more of this surreal into my stories, as you can see in this one, because
Mm-hmm.
then I think I veered more into realistic fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think one of the main reasons why I did that is because realistic fiction allows more character development. So I think this is why, because sure, it's great to write in a sort of surreal, mysterious fashion where you don't really know what is going on, but then you cannot, in order to keep the mystery, I think that you most often find yourself faced with the choice to not really develop the characters because you need to keep up the mystery, right? So you cannot show exactly what is going on. Of course, you can blend them like Susanna Clarke does in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, but yeah, I guess you have to make some choices, and it did not fit very well with my plot because here this is really not character oriented, this short story of mine, and then I started focusing more on characters.
Mm-hmm.
I was really faced, like I was talking in previous sessions about my changes to Sons of Disobedience. This was one of the main problems, to keep up the mystery. I had to give up a lot of character development, and I didn't like it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I counterbalanced it, and now I have less surreal and more psychology, we can say,
Mm-hmm.
and also social, I don't know, social attitudes and things like that.
Yeah, I think the first story I read from you was the one about Ingvar when he was in Kiev, right?
Oh
In Kiev
yeah,
Rus, and he was also under hallucinatory drugs, right? Or it
yeah,
felt like he
exactly.
was because he was in a berserker state.
Oh yes, exactly, exactly. Oh
Yes.
yeah. I will post this story probably soon in my Tales from the North series, and of course I'm going to edit it because I know so much more about Ingvar than I did back then. So I'm going to change certain things. But yes, that was one way in which I really liked showing. Well, I can't really call it supernatural because, like you said, it's hallucinogens. So, but I also wanted a kind of a mysterious, mystical feel, and I achieved that through long, rather incoherent streams of consciousness. So this is what I did there. And it also has a theme of magic because he's meeting a witch. So yes.
Is it a bit like Ulysses and other works of modernism where there's like these crazy long passages of, streams of consciousness? Would you say you're influenced by those authors as well?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. I really liked the stream of consciousnesses in modernist literature, um, James Joyce and Virginia Woolf and things like that. So yes, I really wanted to try my hand at that, and I thought that mixing that with magical themes and with the Middle Ages would achieve a really nice effect. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I really was inspired by, well, mostly by Virginia Woolf because yeah, I think that's the one because she also has PTSD in Mrs. Dalloway, and well, there's also some PTSD in Ingvar's stream of consciousness. So yeah, I think I was inspired by that as well.
Mm-hmm. And now that we know so much more about Ingvar, I think he definitely has some kind of PTSD, especially, because of how he was raised.
Oh yes, exactly. And because he is this kind of a person who really dislikes talking about himself, well, presumably also because there are things in his past that he doesn't want to remember, doesn't want to share, but also because of his personality, right? So it is only in his thoughts, in his stream of thoughts, that we can really see what's going on deep inside him
Mm-hmm.
because he would never put those things in words.
No, he wouldn't. Yeah. Like you said, after, he doesn't end up with Eyolf, he never mentions him anymore.
Oh yes, exactly. Exactly.
He's very mysterious. I think once you said that your original aim with Ingvar was to make him like kind of like Kurtz from the Heart of Darkness, right? Kind of unknowable. And we don't really see anything from his perspective, only from how Aiden and the others see him. So we don't really get to know him. But now, after Lucky Wolf, I think that your approach to characterizing Ingvar has really changed.
Yeah, it has changed a lot. And yeah, I think, I mean, I hope that I did manage to find a way to make him, well, mysterious, and to keep that sometimes mystical feel without presenting him from a distance. So
Mm-hmm.
my first step in that was that story that you mentioned with him in Kiev, because previous to that I had written my first draft of Sons of Disobedience, and there was really nothing from his perspective. And I realized that I had written so many pages, dozens of pages, and he was a character too, but I knew very little about him. So this is when I made that story. I thought, okay, so let's get inside his mind. Let's see how the guy actually thinks, how he speaks. Because, well, with out loud, his sentences are usually made of one word. So,
He doesn't speak. That's the problem.
yeah, exactly. So I thought, okay, then let's look at how he thinks. And that was my first step into knowing Ingvar better. And
Hmm.
then it evolved into Lucky Wolf. So yeah, it's a quite a big difference.
Hmm. So going back to Kaisari, if you ever go back to it and you make changes to it, what do you think you will change? Because I think it's been 4 years since you've touched it, right?
Oh yes, exactly. I haven't even read it in all this time. So I bet that if I went back to it, I would want to change a lot of things. Well, first of all, I would definitely change the artwork if I'm to post it in my Tales from the North series. Well, obviously it's not from the North because it's from Romania, but it'll probably be a bonus piece of fiction after I finish the stories that I want to post. And yeah, definitely the artwork because it will be in watercolors. And in terms of the story, I think I will decide on a point in the past when I want it to happen. So really choose a century and well, there's not so much because it happens in a village, so it's not really so important where it happens. But I feel like I just left that at random, and I'm not really pleased with that. And other than that, I will. I'm really positive I will change a lot about the dialogues because I have improved in terms of writing character interactions. And because that story was um, not supposed to be really based on characters and on psychology, but it was more centered on the the atmosphere and the mysticism. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to how realistic character interactions were. So I think that I had the problem that a lot of fantasy fiction has. So because there are some fantasy elements, other things aren't realistic as well. And it doesn't really make sense because people, well, so psychology is still the same regardless of
Hmm.
um, if magic exists or not in the world. So this is one thing. Oh, and yeah, about that. Also physics went down the drain in that story because I made Codrin wear a mask that was supposed to be it was a replica of a horse's skull. And I did that because that was really cool. It was a really cool idea and I loved it. But at the same time, he's supposed to do front flips. How does one do front flips with that mask on, right? So I'm going to change that. It will probably not be as cool, or I will find a way to show that the mask was really well fastened and it wasn't very big. So
Hmm.
in order
Hmm.
for it to make sense that he could do all those acrobatics with the mask on. So I think these are two of the things that I will change. And I will also make it more clear in uh, well, I wasn't very pleased with how Savina's um, behavior was, especially the part where she sort of tries to seduce him, because I think that nobody understood why I made her do that. The point was that the main rule of the Călușari was to remain chaste, because otherwise they will not be able to see the evil spirits. And she was trying to disrupt that, right? But it was really weird. It was like I don't really remembered how I wrote it, but as I remember it sort of came off like something. Let's put a bit of sex in there, like a bit of flirting because that sells. Well, that was really not my intention. I really had a point. I don't like. I don't really like the way I rendered that.
Hmm. So kind of like Holmgang, you'll be adding more context into it, so it's more obvious to the reader why certain people do certain things, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And because now I think I've improved at finding a way to show mysterious and mystical things without making them unbelievable, unrelatable, and all that. So I can add details without giving everything away. I just want people to understand uh, more about what is happening so that they can um, interpret the symbolism by themselves. Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, you are not even aware that there is a symbolism to it if you don't have all the clues to interpret it. Like as it was with this scene where she tries to seduce him. I think that the reader is not aware that there is a deeper meaning to that, you know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
all in the writing. So the
Mm-hmm.
ideas will be the same, but uh, it's important how you emphasize certain things.
Mm-hmm. I think you have a video to show us how the dance actually was conducted. And it's very demanding to say the least. I mean, it's definitely not for people who are unathletic.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. All right, so indeed I do have a video. I apologize in advance for the quality. I don't know why the quality is so bad. It's a very old video from Romanian TV, and I don't really know how it was recorded and posted on YouTube, but it was I think it was the best depiction of the acrobatic dimension of the dances. So this is what I'm going to show you. I will share my screen. Okay, so this is it. There's also some music. It's 1 minute at most. Okay, yes. So this is it, and yeah, this is also a traditional Romanian boyar's house, something like that. So okay, yeah. So as you can see, indeed, it is very physically demanding, and it's supposed to be really fast. And we could also see the sticks or the wooden swords, and also the military component of it, right? Because they are also jumping and well, snapping the sticks into the ground and shouting things. And well, it's little wonder that Codrin is such a great acrobat in the story, because he was the one to climb from the ravine with the girl holding on to him. And well, in order to be able to do all these things, of course he had to be very athletic. And I imagine that in our times he would be into parkour and free running and things like that. I really imagine him doing that sort of thing, because I was really intrigued when I read that they were supposed to also climb buildings and trees while doing that in order to search for the evil spirits or something. And also those high jumps are supposed to mimic flying. And this is also connected to the wormwood component, because presumably when you chew wormwood, you get this feeling that you are flying. And so when Codrin describes himself flying, well, we can interpret it however we want, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so when can we expect to see it on Tapas? Do you think we'll see it sometime in summer 2021?
Oh, I'm not sure it will be so soon. I mean, it all comes down to whether I decide to post it at the end of the whole stories from the Tales from the North series, since it is an extra, or just randomly. I don't really know. I'll have to see, because I have a lot of short stories, but this is the only one that is actually independent. Because, as I talked about before, most of my shorts, or all of my short stories, are part of a bigger picture, and I have all these characters that um, are from the same world, and the stories are interconnected. So it's it's only this one that is independent, so it doesn't really fit. So I'll have to see how to make it fit, because I'm really fond of it. And
Mhm.
it is also more out of the ordinary, because it is about a culture that is not well known. And even when it comes to Romanian culture, this is an aspect that is really not well known. I mean, most Romanians nowadays don't think about anything when they hear Călușari. They just say, "Oh, it's one traditional dance," but very few people know the symbolism behind it. So I think it would be interesting, and maybe a nice change from all the Scandinavian fiction that I always post. So maybe I'll just post it next summer, right?
Mhm.
So as to bring a little change of scenery into the picture.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for sharing about this story. I can't wait to see you revisit it. You know, it's very fun always to see a lot of the older stories kind of rewritten and parts of it kind of adjusted, years later.
Oh yes, thank you. I'm really curious to read it as well. Um, yeah, I'm eager to revisit it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.